You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life that you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. Building the business you need, and for a lot of people that means turning your life experience into a business, or as some people have said, taking your mess and turning it into a message that is going to inspire, motivate, help, and transform the lives of other people. That's what people are looking for. And if you can create a business that does that is solving problems that people have, all the better. So today's guest is really doing this in a very niche way because of her past experiences that have really made her an expert in a very specific space. I'm speaking with Suzanna Quintana. She is a writer, an abuse survivor, and a single mom. After escaping nearly 2 decades of abuse at the hands of a diagnosed narcissist, she now helps other women recover and heal after abusive relationships. Suzanna is the best-selling author of the new book, You're Still That Girl, Get Over Your Abusive Ex for Good. Suzanna, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's such a pleasure to connect with you and to find out more about how you help people to get through the abuse, and particularly with narcissists, which, wow, that's like really, really serious. That's more than just a difficult relationship. That can be very, very life-threatening. So you have been through a lot. Tell us a little bit about your journey. What's your story?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I am an abuse survivor to a diagnosed narcissist. I spent 16 years and had children with, built a life with, built businesses with. And while I was in the relationship, while I was in the marriage, had no idea I was even a victim of abuse, because the stigma or the stereotype of abuse is usually physical, right? You have to have bruises or black eyes to show that you're in pain. So when you're in a relationship with a narcissist and the majority of abuse, or sometimes all of the abuse, is emotional, financial, psychological, there are no bruises to show for our pain. So many victims, such as myself, when you're in it, you don't even realize, you think the problem is yourself. And certainly I had no idea even what a narcissist was at the time. I thought a narcissist was just someone who looked in the mirror a lot or took too many selfies. So it wasn't until after I escaped that I started the journey of recovering and healing, and also researching about narcissists and what they do. And that was after, once my ex was actually professionally diagnosed as a narcissist, and then realized my own role in it as a victim. And that was what got me started on my journey of healing and recovery.
So help us to understand, what is narcissism? I think a lot of people do have that impression that it's someone who looks in the mirror a lot and takes a lot of selfies, but that describes a lot of people today that are not necessarily narcissists. So what is that? How do you define narcissists?
Well, the difference between, for example, a healthy, emotionally healthy person and a personality disordered person, such as a narcissist, is that while they put on a mask of caring and sympathy in the beginning, or love and passion in the beginning, their entire purpose is to break down a victim and get total control over a victim so they can continue their abuse.
How do you know that someone is narcissist? Does it require a professional diagnosis, and if so, what are the symptoms of someone diagnosed with this? Is it something that they are aware of that they are doing, or is it like a mental illness that they have no control over? Is my question.
Right. No. Absolutely, narcissists and frankly all abusers absolutely know what they're doing, because they have tactics and they use manipulation and mind games in those tactics so that they can continue to make sure that their victim will continue to put up with the abuse.
So it's calculated. It's not like someone who experiences depression where there's a chemical imbalance, they can't help it. This is something that it's calculated, and it's done with the intention of causing harm to someone. Yes,
absolutely. And this is the main reason why victims who are or targets of narcissists are typically empathic, sensitive people, because narcissists can be both men and women, is because we go into it, I'm speaking for myself too, in the beginning, is we have this belief that all people are essentially good in the world, right? Like we have a belief that people make mistakes, and they may make even bad mistakes, but they don't mean to hurt you intentionally. So my big lesson, and what, all the women that I work with, this is all something that you have to come to terms with as a victim of these predators, is that there actually are people out there with their sole intent is to cause harm or destruction of another human being. So that is the main component in our recovery and healing, is because we have these, like I said, these illusions that I went into the relationship thinking that, well, he's a good person. He doesn't mean to hurt me. He doesn't mean to do this. And what that does is that enables them to continue their their abuse, because victims hold on to that belief that they don't really know what they're doing. Or we tend to say, well, which is what I did, he had a bad childhood, or maybe he was abused, or, blah, 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 on and on, that we make excuses for.
And all of that may very well be so, but it doesn't justify the abusive behavior towards you.
Exactly. Right. So that is the biggest illusion, that it was the biggest balloon, the biggest bubble that I had to burst, as far as my illusions and expectations were, is that I needed to come to grips, which is very difficult and very painful, because you're in love with this person, you've invested. I had children with this person, so that. When that bubble pops of your illusion, it is very painful to accept that, wow, these are people who not only know what they're doing, but they do so intensely with purpose. And not only to the ones that love them, but even to their own children.
What was the catalyst for you? I mean, that's got to be an amazing moment when you realize that the person that you have been in a marriage with for 16 years, that they're intentionally trying to destroy you. What was the catalyst? What was the moment when you realized that this is what's going on, and you kind of had your epiphany? What happened? Right.
Well, I wish I could say it was one moment. It was more like an unraveling, as it were. The catalyst was actually that I discovered his double life after nearly 16 years of being with him. Double life that included him messing around, exploiting and grooming, teenage girls that were visiting from Russia. So who were there for working, and he was grooming them to basically replace me. So I discovered this double life, and that was sort of the catalyst for me to say, okay, I need help, right? And it was either leave him or force him to go get counseling. So I chose to force him to go get counseling because I wasn't ready to just, leave the marriage. with that because we had children and so forth. And so we, after several failed attempts of going to therapists, because that's another downside of being involved with a narcissist, is that there are so many, even professionals, even therapists and psychologists who they're not trained in what narcissists are capable of. So narcissists will actually go to therapy, not with the intention of trying to get better, but they kind of enjoy playing the game, don't they? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so if victims aren't careful, like in my case, 3 times over, I was re-traumatized all over again because, he knew how to play the game, per se. And at the time, I didn't know what I was dealing with. So I had the luck to end up finally in the office of a psychologist who actually was an expert on narcissistic personality disorder. And he was the one that I credit with for saving my life because he refused to see us together as a couple. And in our first session, he just basically spent the entire session telling me who the man I was married to was, that he was a narcissist, that it was only going to get worse, that he was never going to change. And the words that really stuck with me at the time was that he doesn't even see me, this man that I loved and invested in, had children with, and would have given my life for. He said that this man didn't even see me as a human being. So it was in that moment that, and never had I in my wildest dreams imagined a psychologist would say, you need to leave, right?
Yeah,
for your own good, for your own safety, for your own well-being.
Because most of them are trying to, let's salvage the marriage. Let's save the marriage. Let's work on this. And your narcissist spouse would be like, yeah, I really want to, let's do it. And he's playing games the whole time and nothing's going to change. And that's got to be shocking.
Yes, absolutely. And what happens before is why victims are traumatized all over again is because when we're in, when we go to therapy with the narcissist and that we get a therapist who doesn't see it and doesn't understand what's going on and how they're being played, this just helps us, this just convinces us to continue to enable and keep taking the abuse, right? Because here we have a professional who's telling us. I had one therapist who told me that, a lot of it was my fault because I wasn't being, affectionate enough. I wasn't opening up enough. And this was at a time when, his cruelty was like over the charts, probably 90% of the time. So, so it was life-changing for me when I found this psychologist.
It's really like getting abused twice. You're getting abuse at the hands of your spouse, and then you go to get professional help, and they don't understand what's going on, and it's like you're getting beat up twice, no matter what you do.
Absolutely.
How did the actual departure happen? Once you realized what was going on, and what did you do at that point? How did you get out of that and break it off? And I understand that actually he refused to break it off, and he actually stalked you for some time after that. Tell us about that.
Yes. So I will tell you, and this will lead to explaining why I do the work I do today with women, because I made every mistake there was to make during the process. I wish, again, I would have had the wherewithal or somebody just to, reach out and give me some help or direction, but I was all alone. In fact, even more so, everybody, including society around me, was telling me that I needed to try harder and try to make my marriage work and so forth. So even when I left the first time, I did return to him, and as the average, a woman returns to an abuser an average of 7 times. It makes sense because when we're all alone, and, as I was when I first left and I had children, I began to doubt myself of, had I made the right decision? Had I just broken up our family and torn our family apart? And narcissists are so they're masters at what's called hoovering. And it's named after the Hoover vacuum because they literally just suck you back into their midst to continue to take their abuse, which is what happened to me. So I went back to him one time and tried to make it work. It was worse than ever. The abuse just got worse. And then finally left him a second time for good. But even that was, it was just a gradual trying to pull myself out of his grasp. And even though I had moved 3 states away back to my home state of Arizona and with my mother, just for, just to find a place to sort of hibernate and escape and recover and hide out a little bit, he, for probably almost 3 years afterwards, was stalking me, cyber stalking me, because narcissists are, I don't want to say there's such a thing as a normal divorce, but with 2 emotionally healthy people, a divorce is, usually you hear that even if the divorce was because someone cheated or, it was in love with somebody else, usually that person will find a new person, right? And then they move on with their life, right? Mm-hmm. Narcissists, even though they will get a new supply, as they're called, my husband at the time had no shortage because he had groomed these young girls he imported them to stay into the country to keep him company, per se. So even that, narcissists are just hell-bent on still controlling you or thinking they have a right to control you and trying to destroy you. That's why divorcing a narcissist is like going to hell and back. It's not something I would wish on my worst enemy. And again, that's why I do what I do now, because if there was any mistake to be made, I made it, whether it was in leaving, going back once, the divorce process, the healing and recovery process. I made every single mistake, which is why I help women today so they don't have to make all the mistakes that I made.
And then what is the biggest problem you see with the women that you help? When they reach out to you or when you cross paths and you see them in that same situation that you were in for so many years, what is the biggest obstacle that you're having to help them to overcome?
The biggest obstacle is that we are so, by the time we have left or been left, we are so emotionally depleted and also traumatized by however many years we were in the abuse, right? It's my firm belief that emotional abuse does far more extensive and lifelong damage than physical abuse does, because it's so insidious. It's almost like a cancer where you don't know that it's slowly killing you until it's too late. So when we're in these, such as all the mistakes I made because I was in such an emotionally tender and vulnerable position. Plus, I was so depleted from just trying to recover from what I had been through for 16 years, and the whole realization that I was a victim and that he was a narcissist and all of that. It's just so overwhelming that I could not, for the life of me, make a rational choice. So that is why it's so easy for us to get sucked back in and to go back. That is why we make so many, dangerous and terrible mistakes that we later regret during like the divorce process, or if there's custody issues, with our children and so forth. So absolutely, that's the biggest mistake. And I made it, 10 times over, is that we just, when we're all alone and we are so emotionally exhausted that, especially in a divorce process, for example, it's, a narcissist is intent on wearing you down to make you give up and say uncle. And so it's very easy. And I did in my case where I did get to a point because I was all alone and I just threw my hands up in the air and I'm like, fine, I can't take this anymore. Take it all. I just wasn't thinking at my right mind.
You win, right? Because I'm just tired of playing the game with you. That is, that's very, that's frightening because that makes you even more vulnerable
Yes.
Because you don't feel like you have the support structure. And you mentioned that narcissistic personality disorder, it can affect men as well as women. So if our listeners are in that situation, and we obviously we can't diagnose their spouse, but if they're in a situation that is abusive, for example, or they feel like that something is going on that isn't right, something is not right. Maybe it is physical abuse, which is obvious, or maybe it's not so obvious emotional abuse and manipulation. Is there something that they can begin to do, or that they should begin to begin to get to the bottom of this and not go through what it took you 16 years to figure out on your own?
Right. Yes, absolutely. This is the basis of my book. What happens when we're in emotionally abusive relationships is we are, unbeknownst to us, we are conditioned or brainwashed to slowly but surely over time, the abuse is normalized to where we start accepting it. So even if there's red flags in the beginning, narcissists are so good at covering those up. They do what's called love bombing in the beginning, which is just this overwhelming amount of love and passion and moving the relationship along very, very quickly. So by the time that that you fall hook, line, and sinker for this person, that you absolutely, you're invested, you fall in love, then maybe you get married and have children. Then when the mask starts to fall off, you're so deep in and you've been conditioned to think these things are normal. Now, when I look back, I can see it all as clear as day. As what happened is that, we all have, and again, this is what my book is about, is that getting in touch with that girl that we used to be, right? Because I used to have, we all have, you can call it intuition or your gut instinct or your sixth sense, whatever it is. We have that voice inside of us that's like, no, don't go there, don't do that. Or, it's the same voice that, like, when I'm walking in a dark parking garage or down a dark alley where there's nobody there, and the hair stands up on my arms and it's like, okay, danger, 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 right? There's a little alert there. So we all have that little voice in us, but what happens is because the abuse is normalized, which again, narcissists are masters at doing. So we don't even know, there's this, it's a much used analogy, but it's perfect. It's like the frog in a pot of cool water. By the time that the pot is boiling, it's too late, right? The frog can't get out. And that's what emotional abuse does, is that you don't even know it's happening. So one of the things that is key is, because when I look back, and now I can look back, I got my PhD in hindsight, right? I can look back and I can see how it happened. And I can see how I ignored that voice within. And I just want to stress that we do not, I did have a, professional diagnosis for my husband at the time, but most people do not, and it's not needed. Because if we go to our gut instinct with emotional abuse, we know, right? We know all we have to do is look at how is someone treating us. If they're treating us 50% of the time with love and respect and all of that makes us feel good, but 50% of the time they're lying, they're cheating, they're manipulating, we don't know what they're doing, we feel sick, we don't feel good in their presence anymore, we're scared of them, on and on and on, right? We really don't need any more signs than that, because a loving relationship, real love does not abuse. So so abuse disguises itself within that so-called love from a narcissist. And in order to spot it, it's really just a matter of getting back in touch with, that voice inside that's like, no girl, he is not being good to you. You know what he's doing. He's lying, he's cheating, whatever it is. So, sometimes we just have to get back to the basics. Yes.
You make such a great point. That I could see a lot of people listening and think, well, I don't know, is my partner narcissist, or is it this, or is it that? Listen, you don't have to wait for a diagnosis from someone
Exactly.
to know how you feel in a relationship. Abuse is abuse, and it's unacceptable in a relationship regardless of why, regardless of the label, regardless of the person's background or what they may be going through or how they were raised. It's always unacceptable. So I really like and love that you are helping people to follow their heart and not go down this path. The name of the book is You're Still That Girl. Get Over Your Abusive Ex for Good. How can our listeners find out more about that book, and how can they connect with you if this resonates?
Yes, absolutely. I welcome anyone who would like a free copy of my book to go to my website at SuzannaQuintana.com. You can also schedule a complimentary strategy session with me, because sometimes, when we're all alone, or we feel like we're all alone and nobody understands us, it's just really nice to talk to somebody who's been there and can relate. I say this all the time, but I'm on the same road as everybody else who's been with a narcissist, even if they're still in it. I just happen to be further down that road. So I have the hindsight and the perspective of what it's like to be there. So they're welcome to reach out to me on my website to get a free copy of the book. I'm also on Facebook, and that's where I do a lot of I share my the writing that I have published that's all around this topic.
Wonderful. And that is SuzannaQuintana.com. And we'll have that link on the Rebelpreneur website underneath this episode as well, so that people can find that and can get that free book. I think that would really change the life of someone who is going through something similar to this. And it sounds like they need all the support and all the help they can get. So I support you, Suzanna, for what you're doing. And congratulations to you for getting out of that situation, and now for turning your mess into a message that is going to help thousands of women who are going through the same thing. You've shared so much great common sense and wisdom with us already. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
I would just like to, because a lot of the work that I do is sort of based on just my own experience and what I needed at the time. So I just want to tell any of your listeners who are in that space, what I call the darkness, and have not come into the light yet, that you're not alone. And even though it may seem a hopeless situation for you and that nothing's ever going to change, I am the poster girl for yes. You deserve to not only get out of it and escape that darkness and your pain and suffering, but you deserve to live a life that you've always dreamed of, and it's never too late.
I love that. Words of wisdom from Suzanna Quintana. She is a writer, an abuse survivor, a single mom, and an escapee from nearly 2 decades of abuse at the hands of a diagnosed narcissist. Suzanna helps other women to recover and heal after abusive relationships. She's the best-selling author of the new book, You're Still That Girl, Get Over Your Abusive Ex for Good. You can get a free copy of that or find out more at SuzannaQuintana.com. And as I say, we'll have that link on the Rebelpreneur website. Suzanna, it's been a real pleasure to connect with you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.